Jesse James was born in 1847 on a small Missouri farm. He and his older brother Frank grew up tending animals, riding horses, and helping with chores in a quiet rural world. Like many frontier children, Jesse learned to ride and shoot early. Firearms were farm tools long before they became part of his legend. Missouri was a border state split between Union and Confederate sympathies. Political arguments at stores, churches, and family tables shaped the air Jesse breathed. Jesse's father, a traveling Baptist preacher, died when Jesse was young. The family was left to manage the farm and their grief without him. When the Civil War erupted, Frank James joined pro-Confederate guerrilla fighters. For Jesse, his big brother's departure pulled the war from rumor into his own doorway. Union patrols rode through the countryside, searching for guerrilla supporters. Families like the Jameses lived under suspicion, caught between armed neighbors. Raids, shootings, and reprisals scarred nearby farms. Even without seeing every skirmish, Jesse grew up amid stories of loyalty, betrayal, and sudden death. As a teenager, Jesse followed Frank into the guerrilla ranks. The war gave him comrades, enemies, and a harsh education in irregular fighting. Jesse was wounded and nearly killed during the fighting. By the war's end, he carried physical scars, deep resentments, and few peaceful skills to build a new life. When the Civil War ended, Missouri did not simply snap back to normal. Burned farms, broken families, and bitter grudges lingered in the countryside. Former guerrillas like Jesse and Frank were not welcomed as returning heroes. Many new authorities saw them as dangerous men who might not accept defeat. New state governments, radical Republican policies, and loyalty oaths deepened tensions. Some Missourians saw the new order as Northern occupation. Robberies and violent incidents in the late 1860s were widely blamed on ex-guerrillas. Jesse's name drifted into reports, even as supporters insisted he was being framed. In 1866, armed riders robbed the Clay County Savings Bank in Liberty, Missouri in broad daylight. It was one of the first peacetime bank robberies of its kind in the United States. A college student was shot and killed as the robbers fled Liberty. Whether this was deliberate or chaotic crossfire, it hardened many locals against the gang. Newspapers across the region seized on the Liberty robbery. Some articles described a ruthless criminal band. Others hinted at political motivations and lingering war grudges. Jesse sometimes responded through friendly newspapers, sending letters that denied crimes, attacked Republican officials, and painted himself as a persecuted Confederate loyalist. Step by step, Jesse became both an outlaw and a political symbol. His robberies struck at banks and railroads that many Southern sympathizers already distrusted. As railroads knit the country together, trains became moving banks filled with cash, bonds, and valuables. Jesse and his partners saw opportunity riding the rails. In 1873, the gang robbed a Rock Island train near Adair, Iowa, derailing the engine on a curve and boarding the cars to seize valuables from the express safe. Stories claim Jesse gave orders not to rob humble passengers and focused on railroad money. Whether always true or not, this image made him look like a selective outlaw rather than a simple thief. As the James Younger gang robbed banks and trains across multiple states, their name became a kind of brand. A robbery could be blamed on them even when they were nowhere nearby. Traveling storytellers, saloon entertainers, and early folk songs spread tales of the gang. Each retelling polished their image as daring riders who defied powerful institutions. The gang lived between safe houses and sympathetic farms, constantly moving to stay ahead of sheriffs and posies. For Jesse and Frank, there was no true home base anymore. Jesse married his cousin Zerelda Mims and tried, at least between raids, to maintain a life that looked ordinary from the outside, with children and rented homes under assumed names. By the mid-1870s, Jesse was living a double life. Affectionate husband and father in private, notorious gang leader in newsprint. Few outlaws balanced such extremes for long. As rewards grew, so did the incentives to betray the gang. Posters offered serious money for information leading to Jesse and Frank's capture or death. By the late 1870s, newspapers from New York to New Orleans ran stories about the James Younger gang. Jesse was no longer just a regional figure. He was national news. Legends claim Jesse spared the poor and punished the rich, turning him into a kind of American Robin Hood. Historical records, however, show little evidence that he redistributed wealth. In some communities, people quietly admired the gang's defiance of railroads and banks. In others, fear of stray bullets and reprisals overshadowed any sympathy. Railroad and express companies hired the Pinkerton National Detective Agency to hunt the gang. Experienced detectives now studied Jesse's habits and patterns. Pinkertons interviewed informants, followed money trails, and rode the same trains and roads as the gang, trying to predict where the next strike would fall. As lawmen and detectives drew closer, encounters became more dangerous. Raids, ambushes, and shootouts blurred the line between law enforcement and private vengeance. For some observers, the gang's later robberies looked less like resistance and more like simple banditry. The Robin Hood stories had always been thin, now they were harder to believe. Jesse and Frank had families to protect, gang members to manage, and enemies on every road. Each new job risked not only their lives, but the lives of those around them. By the height of their fame, there was no easy way for Jesse to step out of his role. Surrender risked execution or lynching, while continuing meant more blood and more enemies. In 1875, Pinkerton agents raided the James family farmhouse, believing Jesse and Frank were inside. They were not, but the raid would leave a lasting mark. A thrown device exploded near the house, killing Jesse and Frank's young half-brother and severely injuring their mother. The attack outraged many locals. Even people who disliked the gang recoiled at the idea of a private agency injuring women and children. The raid gave Jesse a new wave of sympathy in Missouri. From hiding, Jesse reportedly raged over the raid. It deepened his hatred of the railroad interests and strengthened his resolve to keep fighting them. The gang continued to rob banks and trains across the Midwest. Each job brought more chances for mistakes, deaths, and shattered lives on all sides. By 1876, Jesse and Cole Younger targeted Northfield, Minnesota. The town's bank was connected to prominent northern businessmen they saw as symbols of the enemy. The plan called for disguised riders to enter Northfield calmly, then strike fast at the bank and escape before local citizens could respond. What the gang did not fully account for was that Northfield citizens were armed, organized, and in no mood to let strangers walk off with their town's money. In late summer 1876, the James Younger party rode north toward Minnesota, unaware that Northfield would become the beginning of the end for the gang. On September 7, 1876, the gang entered Northfield pretending to be ordinary visitors. Some stayed outside on lookout, while others walked toward the bank. Inside the bank, the robbers demanded money and tried to force the staff to open the safe, but the employees stalled and resisted as best they could. Outside, suspicious townspeople quickly realized something was wrong. A cry went up, weapons were fetched, and Northfield began to fight back. When the gang tried to escape, they met gunfire from multiple directions. The raid turned into a chaotic street battle between outlaws and ordinary citizens. Badly shaken, the gang fled town under heavy fire. Several members were killed or wounded, and posses quickly formed to track them across fields and woods. The younger brothers were eventually cornered and captured after a bloody running fight. They survived, but faced long prison sentences for their role in the raid. Jesse and Frank managed to escape the Northfield disaster, riding hard and splitting from the others. But the gang everyone had heard about no longer existed in the same form. In the years after Northfield, Jesse lived under false names in places like Tennessee and back in Missouri, renting houses and pretending to be an ordinary family man while quietly plotting new robberies. With many old comrades dead or in prison, Jesse built a smaller circle of followers that included men like Charlie and Bob Ford. The jobs were fewer, the trust thinner, and the stakes higher. Years on the run left Jesse older, more tired, and increasingly suspicious. He moved often, avoided old allies, and worried constantly about traitors in his shrinking circle. Bob and Charlie Ford became part of Jesse's latest crew. Bob, in particular, balanced admiration, fear, and ambition as he spent more time near the famous outlaw. Authorities quietly signaled that a high reward awaited anyone who could deliver Jesse James. For men struggling with money and nerves, the offer was hard to ignore. In 1882, Jesse lived in a rented house in St. Joseph, Missouri, under an assumed name. The Ford brothers stayed there too, planning what Jesse thought would be another robbery. On the morning of April 3rd, Jesse seemed unusually at ease. He talked with the Fords about small matters and prepared to leave the house, unaware of what they had already decided. Jesse noticed that neighbors might see his gun belt through the window, so he unbuckled his pistols and set them aside before stepping onto a chair to straighten a picture. As Jesse stood with his back turned, Bob Ford raised a pistol and shot him in the back of the head. The most famous outlaw in Missouri never had a chance to draw. The Ford brothers quickly presented themselves to authorities, claiming they had killed Jesse James in the name of the law. Some saw them as heroes, others as cowards who shot a man in his own home. Jesse's death did not end his story. Songs, dime novels, and later films turned him into an enduring symbol of the American outlaw, sometimes more romantic than the reality. Our tiny storytellers remind us that Jesse James was both a real man and a carefully crafted legend. His life grew from war, politics, and hard choices, and his myth grew from songs, stories, and the public's hunger for dramatic heroes and villains. If you want more chibi-sized deep dives into outlaw history, make sure to join us for the next American Outlaw Legends episode.